to Siman Lamed Ches Sif Hey. So this actual Sif is, I think, a big misconception that people have. Lo Yaleinu, if someone passes away, a loved one passes away, until the funeral, that person is called an Einain. Now, in Einain, the most people know about an Einain, besides for restrictions of Shiva, which is you can't shower, etc., the main halach of an Einain is you can't do mitzvahs. You don't do mitzvahs. Now, what's the pshat in that? A lot of people don't understand why. The pshat is because Oisik b'mitzvah pater min mitzvah. In Einain, historically, nowadays it's a little bit more complex because you have like Chaver Kadishas and you have these. But historically, an Einain is someone who has to deal with the burial of his loved one. So he's osik in the mitzvah of burying his loved one, so he's pater from other mitzvahs, from davening, from saying brachas. It's still applied today, even though you could argue that today you're not as osik, but you're still osik conceptually because you have to make phone calls, etc. Unless you mamish. If the funeral home says we're not burying until Monday, then you're maybe not an Einain anymore. Okay, that's not for now. But most people would assume, right, once you bury the person, you're not an Einain anymore. You're a regular Jew. You have certain restrictions of Shiva, but you're back. There's one halacha that people don't, one exception, and that's tefillin. You do not wear tefillin the day of the burial. Even though the burial is over, and you're sitting and you're saying brachas, and you're davening for the chazan, you're davening shachris for the amid. You don't wear tefillin. And there's a misconception, because I had relatives that were praising themselves at the Shiva of how they were makbid to, they got home in time after the funeral to put tefillin on before it was too late. No? Okay? Happens to be Rabbi Shemaiah has a whole shtickle Torah that maybe according to some shittas you're able to, but pashtus, we don't wear tefillin the day of. And the Mechaber says, Avel b'yom rishon, the first day of Avelis, osur l'haniach tefillin. You're not allowed to wear tefillin. Mikan ve'ela chayiv. After the first day, you're chayiv. The second day of Shiva on. Even if people are coming and every day there's new visitors, meaning we don't say the day 3 if you have a new visitor, it's like you're restarting Avelis. But the first day it's Aser. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Afilu b'yom shenikvar einu yom misa, even if the day of the burial is not the day of the death. Right? When the day of the death and the day of burial are not the same day, you could argue the day of burial is not as intense. But no, the day of the burial, the first day of Shiva, there is no tefillin being worn. That means that even if they buried someone Monday night, it's halachically Tuesday is the same day. There's no tefillin the first day. Lo yinich tefillin b'yom. Now he says if aval meis ay nikvar b'chol hamoed menich tefillin bein b'chol hamoed ubein lachar hamoed. If the burial took place on chol hamoed, that's a different halacha. If you wear tefillin on chol hamoed, because chol hamoed is itself lessens everything. And he says, "Afshu yom rishon lavelos kvar nechmu menachme b'moed v'cheike shenikvar b'yom tev sheni yenich tefillin." I'm sorry, meaning he's saying like this: if you bury someone in chol hamoed, then after Yom Tov you put on tefillin right away. Why? So we shouldn't know from such things, but so the halacha, if it happens that if someone passes away in chol hamoed or is buried in chol hamoed, right? The halacha is that the last day of Yom Tov is the first day of Shiva. So you actually only sit Shiva for 6 days. Which means by the time you start Shiva, it's not the first day anymore. So technically, therefore, if the first day of Shiva, which is really the first day after Yom Tov, which is technically the second day of Shiva from a halachic perspective, you put tefillin on. The Mishnah Berurah then says, okay, let's go to the next Mishnah Berurah. Aser, why is it Aser? What's so special about tefillin? Meaning you're a full-fledged Jew, you're davening for the Amid, you don't wear tefillin. The tefillin nikron pe'er, because tefillin are called a crown. And the first day, you don't wear a crown. The first day of Avelis, you're not wearing a crown. It's efer tachas pe'er, right? That there's an ashes in the place of a crown. The first day of Shiva, you don't wear tefillin. You don't put a crown in a place of ashes. That's the halacha. But after that, the only bitterness is the first day, but after that you put on tefillin. The second day you chayiv miyad, he says some places can say you have to wait for the second day for nates. So I guess if you're davening, I don't know why a Shiva house you're davening before Nates, but if you are, happens to be if they do this daylight savings shtick from Trump, it'll be a big problem, big problem for Klal Yisrael. So hopefully he doesn't work out, because then everyone's going to be davening before Nates. I'll be the only one davening after Nates. I'll be davening Chivas, because like Nates will be like 9 o'clock or some craziness. But okay, fine. Mishnah Berurah then says, the Mechaber says in Vav, B'Tisha B'Av Chayim B'Tefillin. But we wear tefillin on Tisha B'Av. Now, Tisha B'Av, says in Mishnah Berurah, the loy chomer Tisha B'Av Mishayim me'avelos, meaning Tisha B'Av is no different than any day of Shiva, other than the first day, and therefore we wear tefillin on Tisha B'Av. Now, we don't wear it during Shachris. Some Sfaradim do. Ashkenazim don't wear it during Shachris. I don't know about I don't know the sects of Sfardim. I know some Sfardim wear it during Shachris. I'm assuming some don't, but we wear it during Mincha. You're a Shachris guy? Not really? That's cool. But the point is, it's like, anyway, Sif Zayin. The Mechaber says, Chasan v'shushbinov v'chol b'nei chuppah peturin. This is obviously, you could see, it's not negef. We don't necessarily follow this way. But the Chasan, the day of his wedding, and his close friends don't wear tefillin. Why? Because the day of the Chasana, they're drunk and they're partying. It's not a time for tefillin. So what's going on? So the Mishnah Berurah says, Dafka b'makam ha'chuppah. By the way, it's Dafka the chuppah, meaning makam ha'chuppah. What does that mean? I guess if the chuppah is at 8 a.m, I guess you get married by Nates, and you're partying all day, you can't wear tefillin. Beturin. Now, Betshuvas Ramah Kasav de Idna Sha'af Chasam Chai B'Kriya Shema Tefillah Milchayav and Chasam V'Chol B'nei Chuppah Gam Tefillin. The Ramah says that this halacha only applied back in the times of the Gemara. In the times of the Gemara, the Chasan and his entourage, not only did they not wear tefillin, but they didn't say Shema, because he was Isaac in the mitzvah, Patam in a mitzvah. But says the Ramah, nowadays that we disregard that halacha and they daven Shema and they daven Ma'ariv, and they'll daven Shachris as well if it's the right time of the Chasan and they'll wear tefillin. The Rebbe questions this. He says that we follow the Shulchan Aruch, it's Pater. Again, this is obviously only a situation where they got married early in the morning. If you're getting married at 1 in the afternoon, 2 in the afternoon, 7 at night, it's obviously talking about a situation where you got married very, very early and you're partying all day. You don't stop the Chasana to put on tefillin. The Mechaber then says in Ches. Now, we'll read the halacha, and it'll also seem to be strange, but you'll see why it's not relevant. Kaisvei tefillin mezuzah Seifrim, who write tefillin mezuzahs, Haim, the Seifrim themselves, v'tagreihem, and the buyers and sellers of tefillin, meaning they're not the Seifers themselves, they're the middlemen, v'tagrei tagrein, and the middlemen's middlemen. In other words, any person who's Isaac in buying and selling and producing tefillin, you don't have to wear tefillin. Kol hayoyim, all day, you never have to wear tefillin, because Isaac b'mitzvah, patam min mitzvah. Zulas b'shas kriya shema tefillah. You have to say shema and tefillah, but you don't have to wear tefillin the rest of the day. Now, first of all, so let's just read the Ramah, and I'll tell you why this is not relevant. There's 2 reasons why it's not relevant, very obvious reasons. And the Ramah says that this whole thing that they wear Kriya Shema Tefillin is because they're not working then. But if they're taka working during this man, then they don't wear Tefillin and Kriya Shema Tefillah either. Because Isaac mitzvah, patam in a mitzvah. Now says the Ramah, if you're able to do both mitzvahs at the same time, meaning if a Sefer can just wear tefillin and write, then avada. Now, it seems from this Mechaber that Seifrim will never wear tefillin. So why is it that this is not true? So it's for 2 reasons. First of all, Seifrim are not working in the morning. I'll think about it. Meaning a Sefer, that's only true if a Sefer is working 24/7. Yeah, if a Sefer wakes up at 5 in the morning and starts writing, and he doesn't stop all day and all night, okay, then conceptually he could be Pater, but that's not relevant. Seifrim daven, have breakfast, and they go to work, so it's not relevant. But there's a second reason. The Mishnah Berurah says in Chav Daled, Avshem Arvichim Bezeh, even though they're making money, you could argue, why would a Sefer be Pater? Isaac b'mitzvah is a big mitzvah, but he's making some cash. It was a grace of mitzvah, I understand, but it's his job. It says in Mishnah Berurah, Dafkim ikar kavanasim k'dei lahamsiyim likar l'mish tzarich lahem. It's dafka if the ikar kavana is to supply tefillin and mezuzahs for people that don't have and people that can't afford it. Meaning, in other words, they're like, siphon for like a gemach. Avlam ikar kavanasim rak l'shtaker. But if their kavana is to make money, so first of all, this will knock out maybe a cipher. You could argue that maybe they have altruistic perspectives. The middlemen, that's a job. They're doing this for money. I'm not saying that it's a bad thing. They're doing this for cash. Like Baruch Hashem, they get to make money in holy reasons. But they're doing it for non-altruistic reasons. If they're non-altruistic reasons, you don't have the heter of Isaac mitzvah patam and mitzvah. It says in Mishnah Berurah, Kainim and Akainim kar yadayad tzrichim kegoin sheniz damen. Meaning, it says the Ramah, if they have to write during Shachris, they're Pater. Let me ask you a question. Who gives them a heter to write during Shachris? If they're writing during Shachris, you're not allowed to write during Shachris. You have to daven. That's the whole point. So all of a sudden you could say, well, I'm just going to write tefillin during Shachris and be exempt from Shachris. You're not allowed to. That's the whole point. You're not allowed to work before Shachris. It says in Mishnah Berurah Yomi, the cases where you have someone who has to buy tefillin and he's got to catch a train and he can't wait for you to finish Shachris. And if you go daven Shachris, he's leaving and he'll never have tefillin. Okay, as you could see why these halachas are not as practical, because then you're potter. By the way, you also have to start writing before the zman begins, because you don't have a heter to write toich zman, even if the guy has to leave. Again, it's that's why you see these are not the chol oisik. Now, by the way, just one halacha. He says oisik b'mitzvah, patim in a mitzvah. Says Mishnah Berurah dafka oisik b'mitzvah kegoin b'shashu loivish atfilin oisik b'tikuni aveda kegoin l'shoitchel l'tzarchel l'shiva l'baleha av b'shashu mekayim mitzvah kegoin shekvar lovish tefillin oishomer aveda aval b'shu mekayim mitzvah hinan oisik b'mitzvah loy mifta mitzvah acheres. I think this is could be it's an obvious thing. Oisik b'mitzvah patim in a mitzvah means that if you're oisik in mitzvah A, you don't have to mitzvah B. It doesn't mean if you're mekayim mitzvah A, you're patim from mitzvah B. I'll tell you why. If I'm wearing tefillin, I get a mitzvah every single second. So that means I never have to do a mitzvah because you're not osik. Osik means you're actively involved in the mitzvah, not fulfilling a mitzvah. Fulfillment of a mitzvah does not exempt from a second mitzvah. It's actively involved in the mitzvah. So when you're wrapping the tefillin, fine. But when you're wearing tefillin, there's no heter of Isaac b'mitzvah. So just as an aside, it's good to know that concept of Isaac b'mitzvah only applies when you're actively involved in pursuing that mitzvah. He says, im tzarich, and he says, just to end off with this, im tzarich l'troich achar acheres. Ratzolam afil meideis aleis batal mitzvah rishona, afil mitzvah shniya yoseh gadol kiven shekvar hischal asik b'rishona. Meaning, in other words, that even if the second mitzvah is greater, if you're Isaac in the first mitzvah, you'll be exempt from the second mitzvah. That'll stop it.